All right, my name's Holly Robichaud. I am a conservative, yes, from Massachusetts. You know, there are some up there, and they let me out for the weekend. We came down, there's some other Republicans here from Massachusetts. I think we all came down on the same dog sled. And, but I'm also a columnist for the Boston Herald and a political consultant. And today I'm going to talk to you about how to rebel against taxes, or as liberals call it, how to rebel against investments. All the time when they want your tax dollars, they call it investments. And to me, every time I hear the word investment these days, even when I get a call from my financial planner, she says, we need to talk about your investments. I'm like, how much you're taking away from me? So it scares me. But yes, in the People's Republic of Massachusetts, we got rid of the gas tax being linked to inflation. And we did it against all odds. You know, not only were we in the bluest of blue states, but we took on so many different aspects, and I'll go through them. First of all, we were one of 3 campaigns in the entire nation to do our ballot campaign all volunteers, all the signature drive, all volunteers. These days, most of them would do paid signature people, getting $10 a signature or $5 a signature. We did it all volunteers. To get on the ballot in Massachusetts, you have to get 68,000 certified signatures. That means you have to get about 100,000 raw signatures. Not only did we get 100,000, we got 120,000 raw signatures in 9 weeks' time using all volunteers. The legislature refused to put us all on the ballot after that. They said, no, we don't like it. We're not going to deal with you. So we had to go out and collect another round of signatures. And this time we were required to only get 11,000, which doesn't sound that bad after you collected 120,000. But there's a little twist on that one. Anybody that had signed before couldn't sign again. So we had to go out and get another 26,000 signatures to make sure we got on the ballot. We kind of really went for overkill on that one because we didn't want to give the Democrats any excuse to keep us off the ballot. The other problem we faced was no one knew the issue. People knew that their gas tax had gone up by 3 cents, but when we started this off, no one knew that the legislature had linked the gas tax to inflation. So as we're out there collecting the signatures, we had to tell people what we were up to, and they quite couldn't believe it. Once we started educating people, of course, the Democrats worded the question so difficultly, you couldn't understand it if you read the ballot question. You didn't know. And in order to vote our way, you'd say, no, you don't want that tax, right? So you'd think the automatic way to vote was no. Actually, you had to vote yes to repeal the issue. And a yes vote, just in general, getting people to vote yes is a lot harder than getting people to vote no. But in order for them to repeal, they had to vote yes, which was very difficult, very confusing to people. If that wasn't enough, then the Department of Transportation, I'll show you here. The Department of Transportation, we caught them campaigning right out of the State House against us. Here's how to campaign. They're DOT, they're using our own taxpayer dollars to campaign against us during this. So we went to the Ethics Commission. We filed all different kinds of complaints against them, and they all blew it off. Okay? They have a higher calling, so they got away with it. But our final thing that we had to overcome was that, and I tell you, I was shocked that they spent so much money, but our opponents spent over $3 million against us to our $100,000. We were outspent 31 to 1, and we still were able to do this, repeal this in the People's Republic of Massachusetts. We ended up with 53% of the vote on Election Day. In fact, we got more votes than our candidate for governor. We led the ticket on that, so we're pretty proud of that. So how do you lead a tax rebellion? What are the things that you need in a tax rebellion? First, you need a cause. I mean, it's always helpful. And if for those Massachusetts people that are here, if I ever invite you over for Chinese food, you don't want to come, because my 3 chairmen will say I called them over for Chinese food and kind of talked them into it over a couple of little Peking raviolis, and then a couple little drinks, and we got them on board. The other thing with our cause is we need to make sure that it was going to win. A couple years ago, there was a tax question in Massachusetts to roll back the sales tax. The sales tax had been increased by 25%. And Carl Howell, well, I agree with her on, rolling back taxes. She went for too big a chunk. She went to take it from 6.25 to 3%. If she had gone to say, let's just roll it back to the 5%, I think she would have won. So what we said at the time was, a lot of people said, well, let's get rid of the 3-cent tax that they increased. And I said, well, let them have the 3 cents, but we want to go after the adjustment to inflation. Because the last time they increased gas taxes, if they had kept that linkage up, the state of Massachusetts would be paying over $1 a gallon in taxes. So that was the bigger thing to get rid of, not the 3 cents. And I also didn't want to be debating during the campaign over 3 cents. Well, it's only 3 cents. It's actually was a 24% increase, but they would just say it was 3 cents. So we needed a good cause. The next thing you need for leading a tax rebellion is good people, a good team. And I have to say, I had the best team. My partners in crime were, Marty Lamb, Steve Elward, and State Representative Jeff Deal, and these guys gave up, it was a 1.5-year campaign. They gave up their lives for the last 1.5 years to make this happen. And then from there, we went out and recruited. I worked on a lot of campaigns in Massachusetts. We brought all of those campaigns together to form one great big team. We had over 1,000 volunteers that ended up helping us to get the signatures to get this on the ballot. And the signature process was really important on educating people. The other thing that we did with the signature process is we used it. We didn't have money for focus groups or anything like that, but we used that to determine our message. We were out there all the time asking people to sign. And I personally collected over, close to 1,000 signatures. And when I was out there, I would ask it different ways to see which way people would respond. Now, if they drove in a Prius, man, they were pretty much giving me the finger. But other than that, we'd ask the questions in different ways. And we thought in the beginning, going in Massachusetts where the Tea Party happened, saying that taxation without representation was a winning way of putting it out there. It wasn't. It turns out the moment we said they're going to automatically increase your gas tax every January, that was the winner. It was clearly the winner. In fact, it was so much the winner, ballot question 2, that had an automatic portion of their question adopted and started saying automatic as much as we were saying automatic, because they knew that wording. So you need to have a good message in order to win these tax rebellions. The fourth thing you need is for us, it was earned media. We work like dogs to go out there and earn the media, to get the free media. It's not free. We really had to earn it. Our first one was we had a kickoff to announce our ballot question, and we had our whole group there at the State House on the stairs, and so the media said, how are you going to get the signatures? And we said, we're going to do it with all volunteers. And at that point, the media laughed at us and kind of walked away and kind of blew us off at that point. But when we held the press conference, when we had the signatures, I kind of got the media there because I tricked them and basically let them think that we weren't going to get the signatures at that point. So they were like looking forward to watching us, kind of eat mea culpa and go down. And then it was so much fun when we rolled out, because we didn't even know at that time we had 120,000. We rolled out a big banner that said 100,000 plus. And it was like, yeah, we're on the ballot. And they couldn't believe it, this ragtag group of people that came together to make this happen. We also did other things to get media. We did a radiothon for signatures. Like everybody does these charity things. We actually got on the air for a couple hours with different favorite local radio show hosts, and we would ask them to, will people call in to pledge signatures? And we had a lot of fun with doing that. The phones rang off the hook when we did that a couple times. My favorite, though, was State Representative Lyons, who called in to say, and I had called him beforehand and said, you got to call in and pledge, because I thought nobody would call in and pledge to do signatures. So he goes, yeah. And so he came up with this great idea that he would call in and pledge the double amount of what anybody else had said to do it. So the person before him said, I'm going to do 200 signatures. And then somebody came on while he's on hold, right? Somebody said, no, I'll do 1,000. So Representative Lyons like, I'll double what anybody else is doing. And so he goes, what's that, 400? And they said, no, they just said 1,000, so it's 2,000. Oh. But anyways, his group ended up total, with the 2 ballot drives, ended up getting us 15,000 signatures. Yes, they really worked hard at it. Every Friday afternoon, we would be on every radio show across the state. Pretty much anybody that I could beg to, and we'd have our chairman out there, and they would say, here's where we're going to be, you know, this is where you can come sign, and it was, once again, it was a way of getting our messages out there. We held rallies. Any place that there was a local daily paper, we held a rally, and we held it where? We held it on the front, on the sidewalk in front of them, so it was a little hard to ignore us. So they'd have to walk out the building to see us. My favorite rally, though, is this one. Yeah, that's the pig on the front of the State House stairs. I love that one. I thought we were going to get arrested at that one when we put the pig up there on the State House stairs. In fact, I was rolling on the ground laughing so hard. And then all these tourists started coming up and taking their picture with the pig, and I really thought somebody was going to come out of the State House at that one to come after us. That one was a little, we had a lot of fun. And then from there, we put the pig on the road. So people got to see the pig in all the parades, and they loved the pig. So, with the pig, it was like a candidate. The pig had his own, had his own traveling schedule. So this is another rally where we rolled out what we call the State House tab. This is a listing of all of the waste within our state government that equaled over $2 billion. So when they were saying, oh, we can't afford to do this, we rolled out this tab. And the funny thing is, it was a lot longer than we thought even the State House stairs were. So, but that was another way of us getting our message out. We did everything possible to get our message out. And we did this early. You can see that it's nice and warm out, and you're thinking, well, we did this in the spring. We didn't wait until October to roll these things out because we knew we had a financial deficit. So we needed these things to resonate. The State House tab, we ended up giving those all smaller ones to all of our candidates that were running for office so that they could get the message out to people. So we did a lot to educate people in the beginning. Let me show you a video. This came off of our pig press conference.
There is no road and bridge problem. It's a spending problem that's going on here in this state. Combined $1 billion over the last 2 years of revenue they didn't expect to have, and yet they still raised our taxes $500 million. Legislature's always going to want more, just like the gas tax, where they want to index it to inflation. They want it to go up automatically without a vote. And we're going to be taking that pig around the state to find the wasteful spending so that you aren't told that the government doesn't have enough money.
And at the ballot box in November, they are going to send the message that they will not tolerate taxation without representation.
The taxpayer wants their legislature to be accountable.
One of our volunteers did that. We were lucky. We had such a devoted group of people that would do things like that. So that was pretty funny to. We shared that all over Facebook, but it was one of those good things. But we were out there so early that during the middle of the summer, the Democratic candidate for governor she had come out and said that she believed in automatic gas tax hikes. So she got this little question.
Speaking of the state bridge repairs, what is the current Massachusetts gas tax? The gas tax.
The percentage on the...
How many cents a gallon?
10 cents?
24 cents a gallon, up from 21. Next January will rise again based on the inflationary indexing.
Oops. And that was a big oops moment for her. I remember I'm kind of one of these weird people on a Sunday during the middle of the summer watching Sunday morning TV, and that she had made this statement, and so wasn't Steve and Jeff, and we were like texting, "Did you see what just happened?" And we actually called the candidate for governor and said, "This is a big deal, or a big Biden deal," and from there, this went every place, and our candidate for governor at the time was behind, and about 10 days later, he was well ahead because of this issue. This ended up being the top issue in the state of Massachusetts for most of the candidates that were out there, and for our candidate for governor. He used this in his ads about that she didn't know what the gas tax price was. Then they also did some fun things about, you know, when was it 10 cents? It was back in the 70s, and so they were having some fun with her on that. And you have to take these moments and jump all over them, and that's what we did. Once we had a moment like this, once we had a video, once we had these pictures of a rally or something like that, we were posting it all over Facebook, sharing it. If it happened, we shared it every place. The other thing we did to earn media is we did letters to the editor, non-stop letters to the editor. Most read section of the newspaper. People think they're pretty old-fashioned, but they're not. We did them for 6 months straight. Every Monday, I would write at least 10 different letters to the editor. We had lots of volunteers, so our campaign manager would send them out to our volunteers, and we'd get them all different ones. We'd laugh when their same letter would end up in 2 different papers, and they kind of like, "Oh, you wrote really well." But we were nonstop with those letters to the editor. Not until the end did our opponents figure out that we were really killing them with the letter to the editor section. We also, this is kind of like, how to campaign for free. If there was a way to do something for free, we were doing it. We have local cable access stations. They allow you to do your own cable show. So what we did is we filmed one cable show, and then we asked all of our volunteers to put it into their communities, so that we had our own cable show on all of the cable access channels in the 351 communities, or whatever ones would take it. So it was another way of getting our message out there for free. We're also very aggressive on editorial boards. We got every editorial board endorsement except for 3, Boston Globe, Metro Daily West, and the Republican out in Springfield. Yeah, they're liberals, what can I say? But other than that, we got all of the other newspapers, and we really worked hard. One of the things that we made sure we did is that they went in first, and that we got the last word, so we could refute everything that they had to say. So those were some of the things. There were a lot of forums around our state. We recruited at least 10 really good speakers, so when our chairman couldn't go, we had our surrogates out there speaking every time for us, and it was pretty easy training because, if they got them on something of saying like, well, we really need the money for this, and then the automatic response was, well, if they need the money, then they should vote for it, and that was a good way of getting our people out of a difficult question. But with the $2 billion worth of waste, we didn't face too many difficult questions on the money. Next thing that you needed and we had to have and make this work is a good grassroots organization. Grassroots and earned media can beat the people that have more money. And we had a huge team. And one of the things we figured out from the beginning is we looked at what Carla Howell had done with her race where she had lost that question, and we looked at where Republicans had won in previous or done pretty well. And we said those are the areas that we need to concentrate where there was a good swing vote that we could possibly win. And that had a high concentration of voters in that area. So we concentrated our resources, our lawn signs, our leaflet drops into those communities. We went door to door. We put out, we had 100,000 pieces of literature. We got a bunch of it out via door to door. When that seemed too slow, we ended up going to malls in targeted areas, and we were putting it on cars, not on the front windshield because that annoys people. We put it on the side, and I tell you, it was catching on so much. Our opponents hired people to go to the malls and pick up our cars, where we put them on the cars. They were scooping them up. So we ended up having to take some of our stuff off of Facebook where we were going to be on dropping the literature so that they would stop stealing our stuff. So the other thing is we gave signs to candidates that were running for office. If they were, they're putting up signs, we wanted them to put up signs for us. We caught Democrats that voted for the automatic gas tax putting their signs right next to us. So we'd actually call the homes, our coordinators would call the homes and say, you have a choice. You can either have the Democratic sign, and they voted for the automatic gas tax, or you can have our sign, but you're not having both. We will not, because our resources were very thin, but we were not going to allow some Democrat that voted for it to put their sign next to it and pretend that they were for the repeal. So we were very aggressive about making sure that, they couldn't use that against us. Where did we did have some money. We had $100,000. And it's not that we didn't try to raise money. We had a lot of groups that we went to the Truckers Association. And they were fearful for the retribution of state government, so they didn't want to get involved. So many people did not want to. Landscapers endorsed us, but wouldn't give us any money because they didn't want to show up on our finance report. But we begged, and we ended up raising about $100,000. And Grover Norquist came out to one of our functions for us, and it was really nice of him to do that. So, but when you have so little money, I have to tell you, it's a lot harder to think about where you can spend it. Our biggest expense was we hired a manager for our grassroots team because we had over 1,000 volunteers. We also did Facebook ads. We tested 5 different ads during the campaign and said which ones really work. My favorite was we had this one where the kid was crying, I don't even vote yet, and they're raising my taxes. I thought that was a winning one. It turns out we had another one where it was groceries. The cost of groceries were going to go up because of the gas tax. And that was the top ad. That was the top ad. So we, despite I thought the kid crying was great, but we ended up with the groceries. We also had a radio ad. I'll play you the radio ad. Now, we put the radio ad in communities where we didn't have good talk radio.
The following is based on a true story. Listener discretion is advised. At the State House, $2 billion wasted in tax dollars, $9 million to make over governor's office, new tolls, 20% increase in registry fees, new taxes on utilities, 11% increase in gas taxes, increased sin taxes, new taxes on Amazon.com sales, 25% increase in sales taxes. Now, Beacon Hill wants automatic gas tax hikes. Our gas taxes are going to increase every year without a vote. That's taxation without representation. We already pay $6.73 in taxes per fill-up, and they want to automatically take more money out of your wallet. Stop forever tax hikes. Vote yes on one. If they want more of our money, vote on it. Join us. Stop automatic tax hikes. Vote yes on one. Paid for by tankthegastax.org.
And we spent $300 to make that ad. I mean, I think we had so many people that really came through for us. On election night, when we won, the calls were from the reporters. First of all, we were the last thing to be called. They called the governor's race, which by 1 percentage point before they called us. I don't care. It was a great night. But on election night, the calls from the reporters were, "Where's your party? Where's your party?" Right? And why aren't you guys having a party? Where's your party? And I said our party was robocalls. We took all of every last dime that we had, and we put it into 300,000 robocalls to swing households that we knew we had to win. And so that's where our party was. We didn't have that. So I've got one last video to show you.
Taxpayer wants their legislature to be accountable. There is no road and bridge problem. It's a spending problem that's going on here in this state. It's a spending problem that's going on here in this state. This is obviously something that we're going to take care of outside the legislature because they are not voting in the interest of you and I.
Not only are we going to do this and get this question on the ballot, but we will not pay for a single signature. It will be completely grassroots.
The work we're doing here in Massachusetts, the 146,000 people that signed the forms to get this on the ballot were right, and we're going to prove it in November.
And at the ballot box in November, they are going to send the message that they will not tolerate taxation without representation. Thank you.
If you guys weren't out there making this happen, coming tonight to support this, making sure we have the bumper stickers, the lawn signs, everything we're going to need to win this thing in November, this thing would go nowhere. You have stepped up and been the people who have been active in making this happen. So I can't thank you guys enough.
we added that last word victory in towards the, on November 4th after we won. So pretty pleased with the whole thing. And what I can say is, look, if we can do this in Massachusetts, where we are the bluest of blue states, and I know Maryland's thinking about it, and I guess Iowa is looking to increase their gas tax by 45%, I heard today. If we can do it in Massachusetts, then you can do it elsewhere. And it doesn't take a lot of money. It just takes determination to make it happy. And we've got a bunch of people that were helped, that are here today in the room that helped on this. But it takes determination to make this happen, and you can do it. I can't begin to tell you enough about that money doesn't determine everything. One final note is when we first decided to do this, there were people within the establishment that came to us and said, we've done polling data, and our polling data shows nobody cares about this issue. And I knew at that moment, that's when I decided we were going to do this, because I turned to him and I said, you know why nobody cares about this issue? It's because I haven't told them they care about this issue. And then we spent the next 18 months making them care about this issue. So we got Scott Moody coming up next.
Thank you, Holly. My name's Scott Moody, and I'm the Chief Executive Officer for State Budget Solutions, which is a national think tank dedicated to budget reforms, because, as Holly aptly pointed out, all of our tax problems fundamentally start from a spending perspective. Now, there are two ways to look at state tax rebellions. One is, as Holly was pointing out, a political issue, a campaign, going out, changing the laws on the books to lower taxes. My training, my background is as an economist, and there's another form of tax rebellion that goes on every single day. Consumers are doing it, taxpayers are doing it, businesses are doing it. They're altering their behavior to lower their tax burden. And that's what I want to talk to you about today, because as many of you being activists, you have the power to take that information, take that reality, and tell a story with it. A story that you can use in so many ways to fight your political battles to lower taxes. And so what I want to talk to you is my background as an economist. I'm very good at developing tax facts, the facts of tax burdens in America today. And unfortunately, I see in our movement, the conservative movement at large, is that we tend to cling to our tax facts, unfortunately. And it's kind of ironic that someone who creates tax facts says that's unfortunate, because to get actual movement, we need to tell stories with those facts. Facts should only be an input. At the end of the day, if you're not coming up with a compelling story like Holly has done in her campaign, you're not going to win the battle. However, I caveat that because tax facts are important, because on the flip side, you can get into trouble by telling a story that doesn't really matter. It could be a situational issue or a personal issue, but not have broader meaning or context. So you need the tax facts to tell you, okay, this is a real problem, but at that point, it needs to then become a tax story so that you can have impact. So let me start with some definitions. Tax fact, what are they? They are statistics, right? For example, state and local tax burden as a percent of personal income. You've probably heard it. Everybody talks about the tax burden, and it's measured in varied ways, but the problem is it's a number. It's dry, it's impersonal, and it's not relatable. Most people don't know when you say 10% of your income necessarily what that even means. A tax story, however, is a real-world example, hopefully, that engages your audience directly because they're actually participating in that activity. And so when you start getting nodding heads, then you know you've touched on that issue, that emotion. So what I'm going to talk to you today specifically is about an issue that I've started researching from an economic perspective a tax fact perspective, but I've since taken and molded into tax stories to make that fact more impactful and more have a greater ability to impact policy. And that issue is cross-border shopping. In Maine and New Hampshire, those two states are complete polar opposites, if you don't know. Maine has one of the highest tax burdens in the country. New Hampshire, of course, does not. It has one of the lowest. And I call it the Great Tax Divide, because that one imaginary border between those two states can result in dramatically different tax burdens. So, for example, New Hampshire has no sales tax, no personal income tax, and very low excise taxes on liquor, on gasoline, and until very recently, cigarettes. Now, what this does is it's created a huge incentive for Mainers to shop over in New Hampshire, but not just Mainers. We have Massachusetts taxpayers do it all the time. Vermont taxpayers do it all the time. I actually live on the Vermont border, and I see cross-border shopping from Vermonters as well. So it's a global problem for the whole region. Well, I say it's a problem only from those states' perspective. New Hampshire, of course, benefits greatly from the cross-border shopping. So here is the tax fact. I did a study that looked at the differences in retail sales on a per-person basis along the border counties between Maine and New Hampshire. And what I found, if you look at this over time, is quite startling and quite in line with economic theory, right? That taxes matter. You can see in this chart that in 1948, which was the first year of data I could get going back on this, you can see that per-person retail sales in those counties in Maine and New Hampshire are virtually identical. But over time, and as you see those percentages, that's the Maine sales tax rate. Now, I've only superimposed the sales tax rate, but many, many other taxes were increasing on the Maine side of the border over this time. As I pointed out earlier, excise taxes on cigarettes and liquor being key components to this. But you can see just by plotting the sales tax, you can see as the rate goes up, the difference in per capita sales in New Hampshire increases with Maine. And where it hit the peak there in 1992 to 97 at 6%, you can see a steep incline in per capita sales on the New Hampshire side of the border. Since then, Maine has backed off a little bit from 6%, it's dropped to 5%, and you can see that that difference plateauing somewhat. This is the tax fact. This is a chart. The problem with this chart is without me standing here explaining it to you, it makes your eyes water, right? I mean, you have no way to necessarily interpret that, and that's a problem. You need to be able to distill what this chart is saying, but in a way that relates to people. So let me give you some examples of how I began to do that. The first part is, okay, we know if retail sales are changing. Oh, by the way, I forgot to mention the aggregate difference now between Maine and New Hampshire is $2 billion. That's what that difference equates. So basically, every year, Maine is spotting the New Hampshire economy $2 billion every single year because of cross-border shopping. So it's a big deal. It's huge in terms of also with the tax impact to Maine, because they're losing $2 billion worth of taxable sales to New Hampshire. So obviously with that big of a gap and that much money on the table, it's going to create some very visible telltale signs. And here, what I did is simply plotted the location of every big box retail store that existed on the Maine and New Hampshire border. And what you'll see immediately is on the Maine side of the border is a 50-mile retail desert, what I call a desert. There are very few, in fact, there's only one little area down there in southern Maine where there's any big boxes at all. Otherwise, you have to drive 50 miles into the state before you'll find a big box store. Contrast that with what you see on the New Hampshire side of the border. All of the big boxes are actually located as close to the border as possible. And in fact, if you look down at Rochester, you can just see the Rochester name. There is a Walmart that is literally built on the state line. The edge of the parking lot is the state line. So you can't get any closer to Maine than that. And I'll tell you another story about that particular Walmart here in a moment. So that one picture then becomes your story. And, you can share that on social media. You can write op-eds, letters to the editor, just around that one picture and give somebody a visual that they can see immediately. And what happens is then people start, you see something like this, well, then you start to notice. You're driving around Maine and New Hampshire on vacation one day, and then you start to also notice these differences. And by the way, these are just big box stores. If I could somehow included all the retail, the boutique retail that cluster around a Walmart, for example, it's massive, especially down in southern New Hampshire. Basically, you can't build another big box today because all the land is taken up between the big boxes and all the associated retail around southern New Hampshire, which is why I think those two big boxes in Maine even exist today. Is because it's a function of lack of real estate more than anything. Now, another way you can take advantage of this and make a nice story is I decided to go and physically visit these stores and simply count Maine license plates that were in the parking lot at any given time. So that story that I just mentioned, the store that's located right on the border, that particular store at any given time, if you drive through the parking lot, 80% of the license plates will be Maine at any given. And I've driven at that store at all times of the day, and that's true. So this can be a simple exercise. Visit a couple of stores, you count up, you make a few assumptions about, how many cars come in and out, and you can come up with an estimate of how much that one store is losing the state of Maine in terms of revenue. And I released a whole series of reports on that when I was in Maine, chronicling that, and it was probably the most popular series I've ever done because everybody in Maine has done it. At some point or another, they've either done it themselves or they know somebody who has driven to New Hampshire, picked up some liquor, one time I saw a Maine license plate truck with a Yodel wood stove in the back. That's a $2,000 purchase. Probably saved himself, $100 or so in sales taxes. So everybody knows somebody who's done it. And it's also not a local border problem. What it does is the further you get away from New Hampshire, it becomes more organized. And what I mean by that is there's a family member, say, who's going on vacation, will take orders from their immediate family and they'll pick it up. I've even heard of people renting a van or taking a van for the day, taking orders, driving down and loading up and then coming back to fulfill, quote unquote, the orders. So it becomes more organized, whereas along the border it's more casual. You can easily jump in your car and stop at Walmart in New Hampshire, for example. Now, the great thing also about license plate counting is it can get really, really personal. And what I mean by that is every legislator has their own plate, right? And it's been very frequent that a legislator has been caught cross-border shopping in New Hampshire. I have a personal story. Like I said, I live on the Vermont side, and one day I was shopping in Lebanon, New Hampshire, which is sort of the cross-border mecca for Vermont. And I was just driving around. I noticed a Vermont legislator tag in front of me. It was a Subaru, and it had a huge, not this big screen TV in the back. That was all you could see that they had just purchased. I couldn't even see the driver because the TV was so big. And I was fumbling for a camera, my phone or my camera at the time, and I didn't get a chance to get a picture because they turned off. They weren't done shopping yet. So that would have been a great picture if I had been able to capture it. Another great story, and this is actually Holly State, is a Massachusetts legislator a few years ago passed a bill to apply their sales tax to liquor. And they got it passed. And a couple of months later, that same legislator was caught in New Hampshire buying liquor. That story catapulted the repeal of that tax the very next session. So you can see the power of stories, just one story, and you can change the legislative outlook in a state. So you're saying, well, I don't live in New Hampshire. How does this apply to me? How could I leverage cross-border shopping for my story? Well, number one, there are 4 other states that don't have a statewide sales tax in the continental U.S., and that's Montana, Delaware, New Hampshire, and Oregon. So maybe if you're fortunate enough to live next to one of those states, you can do some of these tactics I did in the Maine versus New Hampshire. Or you may live in one of the 38 states that allow what are called local option sales taxes. These are add-ons that counties or cities or towns can actually levy their own sales tax above the state rate. And that can create all kinds of opportunities for cross-border shopping at a local level. One good example of this would be like Chicago, for example, levies their own local option sales tax. And with a metropolis as big as Chicago, not only do you have the catalyst for cross-border shopping within the state of Illinois, but then you've also got the state differentials of Wisconsin and Indiana very close by. So that same dynamic, of course, happens in New York City all the time, where you've got a tri-state area, as well as the higher taxes of New York City itself. So you can leverage local option sales taxes as well to explore cross-border shopping in your state. However, that's not the only issue that you can find, and I'm sure Holly could have spoken for 3 hours. I could easily talk for 3 hours about all of these other ways that you can create compelling tax stories. But unfortunately, we only have about 20 minutes. But I can walk you through quickly. One is the out-migration of your neighbors to greener pastures. How many folks have you heard say, I want to move to Florida, or I want to move to Texas, right, because of the income tax? Well, that becomes an opportunity for you to tell a tax story. I don't know if you visited the booth downstairs, the How Money Walks booth. That's a great place to start. Again, they've done a great job of starting with the tax facts. So if you use their big screen app that they have, you can see your county to another county. Do you in fact have a migration problem? That's the fact. Once you identify that fact, then you can start looking for opportunities to then tell a story, whether that's your neighbor or it could be a company that leaves because they were either lured by a tax break or your town gave a tax break. Now, I don't favor these kind of tactics. That's crony capitalism. But nonetheless, if it's happening, that's usually a sign that A, taxes are too high, and B, it's an opportunity for you to tell a story that taxes are too high. So use it to your advantage. And then finally, there are activities relating to excise tax differentials, such as cigarette smuggling that's going on right now. The Mackinac Center, for example, they're a Michigan-based think tank, just released a study on cigarette smuggling. And it's a huge problem. And there actually been terrorists who have been caught smuggling cigarettes within the United States borders as a fundraising means of fundraising. So it's a very big industry, and one that you just simply watch police or news reports to get that information, and that can be very powerful information to use in your tax story. So that's all I have. I guess I want to open it up for questions, either for myself or for Holly. Yes, sir.
Are you describing a revenue problem for tax states, or are you advocating tax evasion?
Well, I don't encourage breaking the law, but that does not deny the reality that taxpayers do engage in rational tax minimization strategies. Now, that's exactly why, if people are willing to break the law or are willing to go extraordinary methods to lower their tax burden, that is a very powerful sign that taxes are in fact too high. So you cannot repeal the law of economics through a legislative action, although we try all the time, don't we? So the fact that policymakers have deemed, taxing you at 10%, which is just say completely unaffordable, will just force, unfortunately, taxpayers to become criminals. And that is a much bigger moral problem, philosophical problem that we could talk about for a very long time.
If you want a tax story, from when I lived in Northern Virginia, just on the D.C. side of the Francis Scott Key Bridge, there was a liquor store. And just before holidays, the Virginia State Revenue people would march to the parking lot, report the license plates to their colleagues on the other side, the Virginia side of the bridge, who would then stop people who were taking cases of liquor across the bridge, having bought it at a lower tax rate in D.C. To try to smuggle it into Virginia.
Absolutely.
And every holiday season, there would be stories in the Post or other media outlets about how many people were busted coming across the Francis Scott Key Bridge with a case of liquor in the trunk.
And do we really want heavy-handed police tactics to fix this problem of simply, why aren't we focusing on DC's spending addiction problem, which is necessitating these high tax rates? You know, that a lot of these tax issues do bring up some very interesting state sovereignty issues as well, because Massachusetts has done that to New Hampshire. They would send their police across the border to monitor liquor purchases. Well, New Hampshire state police arrested them for trespassing. So yes, these border wars do go on.
At the time, I don't know if it's changed, but at the time, hard liquor sales was a state monopoly in Virginia.
Mm-hmm.
So the state excise taxes were higher than they were here in the District of Columbia.
Yes, ironically, New Hampshire is also state-run, but they run it like a private business and use the price differences to drive cross-border shopping. Yes, sir?
Yeah, question for Holly. Have you done any work in that elusive area of electing conservative-type people to school boards?
Electing people, conservatives to school boards. I do selectman races. I really haven't done any school committee races. A couple years ago, I worked with a group that we did some out in Colorado electing people to school boards out there. But for the most part, I elected legislators that are conservative, and we're trying to get more up there every single day.
To that point, there is an organization in Massachusetts called CommonCoreForum.org that is very active in trying to get people elected to school boards because of Common Core. Yeah, well, that's where I'm coming from too. My association is keenly interested in attacking Common Core by getting in league with the moms who started the whole movement from the bottom up. It's one of the great phenomena of our current time. We want to help aid and abet the moms.
Yep, good idea. Any other questions?
Well, great.
Well,
So,
thank you.
what about for taxes and state taxes and capital investment? Do you have any resources on that?
Well, I think you're really talking about businesses in that sense. And of course, businesses are reacting to taxes all the time. You know, right now we're talking about, for example, repatriation of income that would be used for investment and capital purchases in the United States, except for the fact that the U.S. corporate income tax now, I think, is the second highest in the world. It's punitive. So what companies do is they go to great lengths to keep the money out of the United States. And a few years ago, we did have a repatriation of that money. We lowered taxes temporarily, and the money just came flooding in. I think it exceeded expectations at the time, and I think we're debating it now, whether we should do that. Of course, the permanent fix, if you observe taxpayer behavior, again, this isn't rocket science, just observe behavior, you'd have to conclude the tax rate's too high. So lower the tax rate, that money will come in, the investments that you're talking about will happen, and we'll all be better off. But tax policy is stopping it. Yes, sir.
I just found it interesting, though, that the Eric Gardner story was exceptionally tragic, but he was actually selling loose cigarettes because in New York City, the taxes, the state taxes and the city taxes are so high that it's actually profitable to buy packs or cartons of cigarettes and then sell them loose on the streets. That is something that is, it was a tragic situation, but it was something also that the New York police were cracking down on.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, that in itself was a tragedy, a kind of a over-the-top story that kind of got lost in the whole racial component of it.
That's right. New York City has become a hotbed of cigarette smuggling since they've raised their own cigarette tax. And, you know, it's compounded by the fact that they're physically very closely located to low-tax cigarette states like North Carolina, which is also a big tobacco producer as well. And you're right, it's unfortunate that the broader story didn't surface from that because of the other issues. But it's going on every day in New York City. In fact, there was one study that was done in Chicago looking at the stamp. You know, every cigarette has to have a stamp to prove that they paid the taxes on it. They went around and just collected discarded cigarette package in the city of Chicago, because the city of Chicago levies its own cigarette tax like New York City. And they found that the vast majority of the packs being discarded in Chicago did not bear the Chicago stamp. So people were buying them outside the city and then consuming them inside the city.
Going in on a tax on necessity might be somewhat easier to organize into something simpler before than to try to revolt against a sin tax, the tax on liquor, tax on cigarettes, something of that sort. Is there any examples where a group in a state somewhere tries to roll back taxes on cigarettes or alcohol?
Massachusetts did alcohol a couple years ago. They put a double taxation on alcohol, and they rolled that back.
Sales tax plus the excise.
Right, yeah. And but you know, that campaign would spend millions of dollars to get that tax repealed.
No, yeah. In general, it's very hard to actually lower excise taxes because the other lobby, you know, the cigarette lobby, for example, they make it a health issue at the end of the day. And in fact, New Hampshire has lost its advantage because the health lobby there is winning, and they've actually increased the cigarette tax so much that there's very little differential now between Massachusetts, Maine, and Vermont. And so that part of cross-border shopping has actually declined somewhat. So yeah, it's a very tough thing to do.
To what extent is Charlie using your list of wasteful spending to attack his budget deficit?
I think he's going through it, and we'll see what the budget comes out with next week. March 4th, we're keeping our fingers crossed, but there's a lot. The first one was the climatologist gone. They got rid of the climatologist for $100,000, so that was good. And he got rid of Gruber this week, and so there'll be more. Can't get rid of the governor's office for $9 million, you know. So, but well, he's still, yeah, he's using a smaller office. He's not using the big, you know, the $9 million makeover office. So, yeah.
You should suggest that they open it up as a museum to wasteful government spending.
Yeah.
Have guided tours. Here are the $500,000 drapes or whatever.
Well, they have the whole also the bunker within that office, right? Right. But yet, when there was the snowstorm, he went to MEMA. You know, so why did we have to have a separate bunker for the, you know, it's just the whole thing. It just, that office is just such an example. And you know, the day that the whole makeover of we were in the middle of collecting signatures, I was out at a grocery food store, and the office, you know, how much he was spending came out while I was at the grocery food store collecting signatures, and I said, I got to go book some people on radio to talk about this. And we jumped right on it to you know, once again say, this is why people need to come out and support us on this issue. So anytime they did something stupid, we were all over it, which was, we were on the radio a lot.
Target rich environment.
Well, actually it goes to a point that he was making. There's things like Common Core. Every day there's new activists that are getting out there in different things. At every point, when you're talking to them, you need to say, yes, you need to be active on this particular issue that got you out here first. But you also need to be active in everything else, because you weren't active 5 years ago. This is how we got to where we are now. And that's just an exceptionally important point to make with people. Is it really, we can't go back to sleeping in.
Well, you know, to that point, we were shocked that nobody else stepped forward about the tax package that, you know, and so, you know, and when we decided to do it, how many people told us not to do it and stuff like that. And if we hadn't, it'd still be going on. And Grover has said, you know, to a lot of people that, you know, there was a governor he was talking to on the phone who said he was thinking about doing this form of taxation. And Grover said, did you see what happened in Massachusetts? Yeah, you want to get reelected? I wouldn't go that way. So.
Radio ads or radio discussions were really useful in getting people out, because a lot of folks do listen to those AM radio stations, and they get their news that way.
Yeah.
And, you know, they were calling around. I get lots of calls. Where can we sign? Where can we sign? When are you going to be set up for signing? You know, and I could direct them, you know, go Saturday at Hannaford's Market.
Yeah. Well, one of the things is people had said AM radio was dead and talk radio was dead. And after our election, they went and wrote an article about, you know, within the radio, you know, a radio magazine saying how that our ballot question proved how effective talk radio can be, because we couldn't afford to advertise on radio. So, you know, we used the talk radio and to get as our Jeff, who was one of our chairmen, joked around, he was on radio more than Cars for Kids ads. So, yeah.
Great. Well, thank you.
Thanks.